Welcome, everybody. We have another edition of our virtual Ignatian Conversations as we're taking things online, but wanting to keep the conversations going. And I'm excited to be here today with Mr. Doug Brown, one of our resident poets, expert Ignatian people. We've been doing a number of podcasts together, and I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk with him around the creative process, around poetry, around how those ways of being help us to discern who we are and what we're supposed to do in our lives. So.
I really believe in an unfinished product almost, as the human as the unfinished product, and the poetry or the art is a way to try to refine either the way I'm thinking about a subject or the way I'm trying to approach a subject, or think about it on a deeper level than just like our surface everyday conversations or interactions, that I can elevate that conversation a little bit. And in that elevation, there has to be like this moment or a series of moments, I think, where I need to think about what I'm trying to say, because ultimately the art is going to live on its own outside of me. And so if I'm putting it from putting what's been inside of me, in my heart or in on my head, on a sheet of paper, then they have to be able to decipher those things. And emotions and thoughts are not easy to decipher for anyone, right? And so the process of discernment, sometimes as a poem, it looks like a finished product, but I really think it's an unfinished product. And, there are poets who have ideas about things and who think deeply on things, and later in life they think about them again and they revamp what they thought about. So like John Milton, for example, wrote sonnets about growing old when he was young, and then when he was old he rewrote those sonnets, and if you look at them side by side, they almost contradict one another, as they should, right? Because one was thinking about the experience of being elderly, and one was like in the full know of being elderly. So it's things like that that I like to remember.
No,
It gives me hope.
Absolutely. That makes me think so much of, and why I think it connects so well with this kind of idea of Ignatian discernment, because one of the gifts that St. Ignatius gives in spirituality is that ability to really pay attention in each moment to what's going on, right? And the struggle often to put that into words. I think when you're meeting with somebody in like a spiritual conversation for the first time, and it can be helpful to tell people, it's going to be a struggle to talk about God or your relationship with God, because those aren't things we're used to talking about, right? And it'll take a while to find the right words. And that's kind of an interactive spiritual process that relates so much to what you're talking about with poetry.
I think you talked about the interior movement that Ignatius refers to, and that's like a beautiful way to see a poem. And I think so many people approach a poem thinking that the poem says and knows all, but most of the time it's the poet trying to figure it out. And their language is talking about the world that's in front of them or the world they've been thinking about, but it's really just a figuring it out. And it's like those old masters, the way they sound, like the poet like W.H. Auden, Eliot, they sound so convincing in their language, but it's really them trying to figure out their own interior, and how that paying close attention, turning those details of their life into image, is really helpful in them trying to figure it out and to connect to people. I think that's the other thing, is how do you connect, to that. For me, I have found solace in a poem or poetry to be still connecting me.
No, absolutely. Well, I think that such an important point about how we're able to connect in these ways that aren't the traditional ones of being in physical contact with people. And something that I think Ignatius relates very much to Ignatius's life, because in the other episode we talked with Christian Strawn about daydreaming and how much
Mhm.
that early part of Ignatius's life in recovery was using the stories of other people, life of
Mhm.
Christ, the lives of the saints, and then his own imagination to,
Right.
to build a connection, right? And then over the years, all the ways that he listened to other people's spiritual experiences and that and his own gave him the basis for kind of what became the spiritual exercises. So, too, poetry provides this powerful example for us to peer into the souls of other people, for them to kind of,
Mhm.
for us to see them working out who they are and what their relationship with God is. So I think that's another powerful resource that's so timely for people to kind of deepen in who they are in their relationship with God, and then these questions ultimately of discernment.
I did a reading this weekend on Instagram, and you're basically alone, or if somebody's in the room with you, but then you're reaching out to like hundreds of people who are online at the same time. And it's an interesting feeling.
Yeah.
Poetry can move many folks. And even though, like, you know you feel alone with the whole thing, even the reading of it, you might feel alone, but at the same time, so many people are vibing there with you, because of what you put together. And so, like, you know there's this old model of the writer, where the writer's alone in a cave or in their rooms, in the dark or barely lit light, and hunkered over a desk and agonizing over a desk, or this idea of like the tortured artist. But a lot of those things are old, and a lot of artists are more and more so are needing community to be in, and are having a hard time with this kind of solitude.
Mhm.
And I do think, writing does need solitude, and there is a certain part of loneliness about it, uh, necessary loneliness that you go through. But because you have so many stories that you hear, kind of like what you were saying with Ignatius, that we don't often take the time to pay attention. And that's the kind of solitude you need, is just to move away so you can pay attention to the things that have been presented to you. Because if not, if you're always amongst community, as you know, it's just like you're bombarded with stories and bombarded with things, and you never get to really sift through it. And that's the discernment. One of the older etymologies of it is to sift, right? To sift through the things that you have through it, and that sifting takes time. And
Mhm.
a good poem, a poem that you craft, a poem that you work on, might ask some questions, and you see the writer and the poet sifting through what uh, what's been on their mind, or what is ailing them, or what they're rejoicing in,
Mhm.
or what they're paying attention to.
Right, right. And I think, yeah, why don't you read us something?
All right, so here is I'm going to read you this poem. So this poem is going to get published at UC Irvine's Fault Line. This is called An Abad for the Unexpected. An abad is a morning poem. It's a poem written in the morning, in celebration of the morning. Most of the time, it's a love poem, um, and this is a love poem of sorts. Abad for the unexpected. Sometimes she seizes me when I'm cooking or handling the baby in a manner I should know better. For goodness sake, cover her head. It's cold out. Even today, at morning's break, the floor creaks mom back, away and meddling. Can you visit later? Although I'm too old to be spooked by any specter, Family history reminds how one granddad abandoned my father at the sight of a body floating through thick night, while another granddad embraced the Pentecost so fully he claimed to witness the holy descend upon his baloney. Think a scarcely traveled road, apparitions ambling amongst Mississippi alms, or think a hazy glow resting on cold cuts, unexpected grace upon a meal. Some mornings I laugh, some I pray. I do what it takes to tell myself all good. I custom control, master and remix deflection until a friend's drawing somehow appears in my notebook to tell me otherwise. And peeking between her sketches, my dead mother captured in ink. This dark drawing, this imminent morning slaps. You are living without parents, and there is no drama, no wind, no maelstrom, nothing but my newborn cracking this quiet. And I go to the baby, offering patience and ease. You're all right, sweet girl. You're all right. My faint whispers, an extra blanket, guarantee the child's sleep will last an hour more. In this barely lit day, so much mistaken for cold, but nothing I conjure. My mother's talent to make peace with the unwieldy. For goodness sake, boy, for goodness sake.
Thank you. Oh.
So there's like an example of not knowing or being like kind of overwhelmed by so many things that can just fall upon you in the morning, and linking them to all of these other things, you know, and like the idea of discernment and thinking about how I wrote this. Most of the time, sometimes I just go and let the spirit take me where it's going to go. And there are other parts that you come back to and you really craft and really kind of refine, because somebody might not understand it. Somebody might not know. So reading this, I've read this to my wife and to others, like in a small little workshop group. And there are parts that you have to refine so the meaning really conveys that initial thing that you're trying to say. And I guess what this poem is trying to say is that I don't know. And that when I think I know, that's when something happens, and or I think that I'm feeling fine, or when I think that I'm all good, something will happen or remind me to say, hey, maybe you're not all good, but you're not alone with this. You know what I mean? And that's the, like that process of discernment happening again, this process of trying to be real and honest with myself. And you know, I guess that's kind of like an Ignatian thing of discernment. You could tell me about that.
No. I mean, there's a couple things I think just there. One, that what you're speaking about, Doug, about how much we're informed by our experiences and by how we've been shaped by our own history. And it's such an important part often to go back and to be able not only to know, but to own our history. You know, now that was a key part for St. Ignatius, right? He came from a very particular type of family with expectations. And for him, it wasn't that he was rejecting that or his own way of life. He was changing who he was, keeping all of his old determination and his sense of kind of ambition, but now shaped in service to others, right? And in your poem, I mean, it captures so much, all these different people and voices who have made you who you are and who exist there to be shaped and to be owned in a different way.
And that idea, like you said, about paying attention and paying attention to our own histories, I guess that's the other thing about the poem, is that we tend to walk around and not thinking that our past and our families still affect us, right? And not to say that we are beholden to like the mistakes or the sins or the joys of those people, but somehow they are working through us, right? And again, we get so caught up in our everyday that we fail to see like these little things. Like, you know, in writing this poem, I thought about my grandfathers, like all of a sudden, like what they would say about ghosts,
Hmm.
what I knew them to know. Like one grandfather I never knew, but the thing that everybody who did know him, the thing that they say about him is that he was a scary man, and that he saw things. He saw ghosts. He saw, you know what I mean? He
Yeah.
didn't like to be out at night at a certain time.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my other grandfather, who I did know, was a preacher, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think what I love about your poems and also art in general is the way they can help us see that in just an everyday item, there's a world of meaning and possibility. From the
Right.
cold cuts and the bologna to you standing there holding a child, right? And it's like just a moment, but it opens up into all of these other things.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Uh,
you're right. And I would say that about any art. Any
yeah.
art does that and gives us that good glimpse. And, you know, we tend to want to overanalyze and say, well, this equals this and this equals that. But it's really just like that process that you said, how it just like gives you the glimpse. And if that opens it up,
Mhm.
then we don't need to know if it means this or that in particular. All we need to know is that it gave me an emotional feeling to now go back and think about my own self, my own grandparents, my own um, the way I connect with spirits in a
Mhm.
different way. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's all
Absolutely.
that's all my ever intention was,
Yeah.
find that in me to give to somebody
Mhm.
else, you know.
And it's through that process that we are able to get a better sense of what's going on inside of us, to tie back to these interior movements that help us discern, because they key in not some like deeper truth, but they say, hey, there's something resonating here, there's something
Right.
speaking to me. And in Ignatian discernment, you want to pay attention to those things, right?
Yeah.
Because there's something in that process, in that feeling, that we believe God is pointing us to something, and we have to sit with it, listen with it, work through the words, and see where it's pointing. um,
Right. You know, I think about any tough decision people have to make. I think just sitting down and letting go and to write about it in a not so much a linear way, but in a way that might be more creative is going to help people make a decision about it. And even put yourself, it allows you to even switch places. You know, you could think about the decision in a multiplicitous way instead of just saying, well, if I go A, B, and C route, well, no, there's D route and E route who are affecting what the situation might happen, or A slash point 2.0 route that might go and change this direction if you go. And sometimes we forget to think about all of those things, and to write or to create art is really helpful. And because art is sometimes asks you to shift point of view, right?
mhm.
To shift your perspective. And uh, sometimes, and even like a poem like that, where it's written in the second person, is a way for me to get outside of my own self,
Mhm.
right? If I write it too closely from the first person or too far removed from the third person, I might not want to deal with some of those things. But a lot of the poem had to address, you know, that point of view had to address and almost like guide me through the whole thing, you know. That's the beauty of art.
It's beauty of art for sure. Do you have one more poem for us? If we,
Sure, sure.
yeah.
Um, that it's called A Lullaby Becomes the Grace on My Daughter's Forehead. And initially, the poem was written for, it was going to be my newest daughter, who is 2 now. The first poem I wrote about her, right? But it really became a poem that was telling me something about my older daughter, and the fact that just as a father, that how do I give space to them to make decisions, to grow, and to become fully realized people. This lullaby becomes the grace on my daughter's forehead. And when it warbles and then gets down, and then this night, this bass note joins the others, strings and brass hollowing her, sax solo in unison with chimes, head nods, snapbacks, and damn good daddy vibes. And it closes my eyes too, and lulls to when a writer tells me his mama spent her entire life trying to kill her own daddy. Her heart, not a harp, but lost, taken from jump by a man to guide and love every step she regarded. And then there came a time when her damn journey, warbled too, and moved without applause to cleave the sin of fatherhood. So no host of men would tell her body to leave, or when to go astray, or when to let her own crescendos and whirlwinds salute the world, her own melody and ligatures bound to life.
Thank you.
It's a, it's a little bit of a different one, and kind of gets a little dark. But again, I think the necessity, again, this is the discernment part of it. Like in writing that, I had one way that I was going, and then someone told me a story, and it totally took the poem on a totally different direction, and I think it went in a direction that I needed. Versus like, okay, I'm going to give this poem to my daughter. It's about her going to sleep. But no, it's like, well, what are you, to take a colloquial term? What are you sleeping on, Dad? You're sleeping on that, the fact that your daughters are growing and becoming their own. You're trying to put them in that patriarchal world again, that they rebuke, so.
When I felt that in the poem, this sense of kind of the movement and how steady we are, or how sometimes we wobble or we move, or there's a process, and how to that point of like, how much are we able to notice what's stirring for us, right? And how often, and this is the case whether it's teaching or ministry or just relationships with others, how much are we aware of what we're putting onto other people versus what's actually going on for us, right?
Yes.
Because what Ignatius and discernment really wants us to pay attention to is what's moving for us, not what we think we should do, not what we think other people want us to do. And until we're settled, until we know those movements, until we're able to really put words to them and own them as who we are, we can be pushing them out on other people or ignoring things that are right in front of us, right?
Right. And that's the thing about writing or any art. It's really active. It's an activity that makes you start to deal with it. Because I like that. You're right. If you don't start to deal with it, we just start putting it out on anybody else. We blame people. We point fingers. But the idea of sitting down, writing it down, is an activity that we start to figure it out and start to ingest it a little bit more, because we see it. We see it and we take it back in. You know what I mean? Yeah. Before, it's just kind of like huddled deep inside of us. No one to see, not even you.
Right.
And so once it starts getting out on paper or canvas or music, or however,
Mm.
whatever art form it takes, you start to see it and it becomes real, and it starts to inform you, and you try to fix it up because you want to say the right things. Uh, you want to move towards knowing.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
want to move towards
Yeah.
fixing, whether the poem or whether you get fixed in that one poem, it might move you towards another poem,
Yeah.
then another, because it's not going to get fixed in one poem, as another poet told me once. Like, you might have to write, it's not going to get, he told me, actually, it's not going to get fixed in one book. I was like, man, am I that messed up?
Well, that's the reality of the richness that we all have inside of us, right? To tie back to that complexity of all the people, the generations that stand who've made us who we are, and each moment that we live every day, the
Right,
possibilities that are there. And often not, and what I love about poetry, what I love about spirituality, what I love about art, it is how it helps us see the gentleness of that
yeah,
beauty that's there. And I love the two terms that you have right there in the title, right? The lullaby and the grace.
mm-hmm.
Because how often, if we're really able to pay attention to the interior movements and really able to listen to the soft, gentle voice of the
Mm-hmm.
lullaby, we'll see that grace that God is
Right.
opening up for us today and every day.
Okay. So this is a newer poem, and another Obad. I've been writing all these like Obads. I don't know. The more been doing something for me. I guess because I have a little one and I'm up earlier.
Yeah.
Um, Let me see. What should you know here? I'm just gonna read it and we'll chat about it.
Sounds good.
Obad for gratitude. Blessed be the flower corpse, tall and wide, reaching toward morning. Blessed be any creature, bulb or blood, learning to rise up from soot. Blessed be ground cover, rich soil and nutrients, sheltering memory for protection. We remember. Golden joy and out loud laughter postpones pain and thirst. But good Lord, blessed be a thirst when a flower droops. Dried remembrances stink, and that'll learn you how not to heed haunts. And the will it takes to say, dead mother, and go on living. Bless be that too. Nothing stops her empty warnings. What will you do when I'm gone? But hold any answer silent. Embrace the steady wave patience maneuvers upon. When thoughts get hold of grief, when words skim out of control across your live tongue, pen them before they stir. Bless be a song, the morning psalm, resembles a body on fire, a body consumed by worship, not a malady, but a melody you croon by heart, eyes closed in plea or amen. Bless be an amen dancing, a covenant of care, amen, or caress, amen. Take what can't be undone toward rejoice. So when the first light softly offers, you don't dare run or hide. Thank you, Bob.
Amen.
Amen.
Oh.
Appreciate our time
Yeah,
here.
that was powerful. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it so much. I think in each one of those poems and all that you do, an invitation to pay attention to what's happening for us and how we can turn those moments to grace and rejoicing. So it's been a pleasure
Yes.
to be with you this morning. Thank you,
Thank
and
you.
look forward to being in touch again in the future.
Appreciate it.
Peace.
All right.
All right.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.